Good time of day to all.
Greetings.
We transfer our attention today to the first of what will be a series of parashiot that are the first time that we've encountered a parasha that is not narrative for the most part. In fact, there's very little narrative, bit at the end, and that, of course, continues on now pretty much until we get to Bimidbar. For that reason, it shouldn't be at all surprising that these parashiot from Mishpatim, Truma, Tetzaver, that deal with the details of the Mishkan, Vayakel Pekudei, which again are a reiteration of the details of the Mishkan, and most of Sefer Vayikra, which involves details of the different korbanot, did not inspire that much piyut. It's not nearly as much piyut as was inspired by the narrative portions, or by things like the Aseret HaDibrot, which even though, of course, they're not narrative per se, they're a bit, I know we call them meatier, I guess. They offer a greater potential for poetic expression of them, the details of the laws of Shomrim or the laws of Shorsh and Agach or things like that. And yet there were piyutim that were composed specifically for Parashat Mishpatim, and that it is that those piyutim, or two of them, to which we will now turn our attention. And let's get the shared screen up and make it a bit larger. Okay, so we begin, as we have on numerous previous occasions, with pretty much the forerunner of Piyut, Yanai. Again, just a quick reminder, Yanai lived in Palestine, that is to say in the land of Israel, as it was in between the basically the 4th and the 7th centuries under largely Byzantine rule. Yanai himself, not dated with any great degree of accuracy, but somewhere before the 7th century, that is before the Arab Muslim conquest. We have on one previous occasion mentioned his closest successor, Eliezer HaKalir, or sometimes called HaKaliri, and we will take advantage of some of the coming weeks in which there may be a paucity of piyut apropos of the parasha per se, and we'll look at some piyutim that are attributable to Kalir and that may very well reflect the historical circumstances of the land of Israel and the Jews living there at the time of the Arab conquest in the 7th century. But those are coming attractions. So here we go to a Kedushta, again a piyut that was intended to be incorporated into the repetition of the Amidah apropos of Kedusha. For the Seder of the Eila Mishpatim, again, remember in the land of Israel during the lifetime of Yanai, they held to what we call the triennial cycle. So what he called the Seder of the Eila Mishpatim begins where our Parashat Mishpatim begins, but it ended much earlier. Okay. And indeed, this is not the beginning of the piyut, it's merely the conclusion of it. The beginning of the piyut has not survived, but you can see the two concluding lines, and I know that they are the two concluding lines because they start with the last two letters of the alphabet, right, with Shin and Tav, and they address the laws of Evet Ivri, which are the first series of laws to be brought up in the Parasha of Mishpatim. And it says about the Evet Ivri, Sheish Ya'avod, that he serves for 6 years, Notice that I say serves rather than enslaved, because not only does that seem to be the goal of the Torah's description, but it's certainly the goal of the Paitan's description, because he says, "V'lo me'uneh," he should not be oppressed. Uvashvi'it, and in the 7th year, droror ya'aneh, he is freed. And when he is freed, tishalchehu me'unak, he has to be given a gift, a parting gift, severance pay, a parting gift. V'lo mikuneh, he should not be treated as just an item that can be bought or sold. Tachlit, the essence of the laws of Avdut as they are described in the Torah are, he summarizes it, ach ve'achot, a fellow Jew, whether male or a female, lo tikneh, cannot be acquired by purchase. Now, of course, the Torah's words are ki tikneh eved ivri. Okay, so he's not saying that there cannot be an acquisition, but he's basically emphasizing the point that they cannot just be treated as property. Okay, there are limits to what tasks they can be put to. For example, the Torah, not here but in Devarim, in discussing the same laws of Eved Ivri, says, Lo tirdeh bo befarech, that you should not lord it over him befarech. Now the word parech appears only one other time in the Torah, and that, as you may recall, is a description of the manner in which the Egyptians enslaved the Hebrews. Okay. Vayavidu Mitzrayim et bnei Yisrael, how did they enslave them? Befarech, which is usually translated as back-breaking work. So the Torah makes it clear that a Jew who, arguably on account of his financial circumstances, has to sell his services, right, cannot be treated as though he were a slave and cannot be put to back-breaking work, or for that matter, even to other forms of work that are demeaning. Okay, and then the Payatan Yanai quotes a series of biblical verses that address these points. The opening verse of the laws of Eved in Parashat Mishpatim, Ki tikneh v'divrei shesh shanim ya'avod v'ashvi'id yetzeh lachofshi chinam. Okay, and then hakoneh al yismach v'hamocher al yitabel. Right, there's certain transactions. Okay, ki charon el kol hamoneh. Again, moneh, that all business transactions, even those relating to the services of servants, have to be above board. Now, here's a curious one. It comes from the 24th chapter of Isaiah, sometimes called the Apocalypse of Isaiah. V'haya, it shall come to pass in the future, ka'am ka'kohen, that all the people of Israel will be on the same status as Kohanim. Ke'eved ka'adonav, that even people who previously were servants will be on the same status as their masters. Kashivcha kagvirta, referring to women in service. Kakoneh kamocher, notice the equivalence of purchase and sale. Kamalveh kaloveh, kanoshe kaasher noshevo. Right? The vision of the future, the eschatological future, is one in which there is complete social and economic equivalence. Okay? Kiko amar Hashem, chinam nimkartem, v'lo v'chesef tiga'elu. Again, part of the prophecy for the restoration of the Jewish people in the future. They were sold, that is to say, into either slavery or into exile. Chinam, right? They didn't profit from that. Lo b'chesef tiga'elu, but similarly, they will not have to pay for their ultimate redemption. It will come to them for free. And that, as you see, is the way the Piyut concludes. Tiga'alu chinam, right? The Jewish people will be redeemed without their having to pay for the redemption, me'avdot, from slavery. V'chok shvuot edot betalalei tchiyat chidot. I believe that on a previous occasion, we saw the connection between the bracha of Mechayeh HaMeitim. You see the two words underneath it, Baruch on the right-hand side and Mechayeh HaMeitim in parentheses following it. we saw a connection between the bracha of Kiyat HaMeitim and Tal. Okay? If you can, in your mind's eye, conjure up an image of one of the first pages of the Amidah in a Sidur. Okay? Where do we interpolate the phrase either Mashiv HaRuach or Morid HaGeshem in the winter months, or at least according to some liturgical practices, the phrase Morid HaTal in the summer months? It's interpolated into the bracha of Mechayeh HaMeitim. Because according to one Agadic tradition, the instrument, the means with which God brought Isaac back to life, after, again, according to one Agadic rendition, Abraham actually took his life at the Akedah, okay? That the means, the instrument with which God brought him back to life was Tal. Therefore, there is an Agadic association between Tal and resurrection and Tchiyat HaMeitim. Okay. Again, yet another Piyut of Yanai, this one addressing justice in more general terms. Yadach achuzah, right, your hand is holding b'shefet. Okay, now, this is a cute play on words, okay? According to Hebrew morphology, the letters labial consonants, that is to say consonants that are produced by action of the lips, right, which are b, bet, right, mem, pay, okay, somehow are interchangeable, okay? So if you substitute a bet for the pay of shefet, you get shevet. Now, shevet is more recognizable as a staff, okay? Indeed, there is a theory in linguistics that says that the reason that a judge is called a shofet is because he administers justice through the shevet, through the rod, okay? So, yadcha achuzah b'shefet is a double entendre. It's saying that it's addressing a judge, a shofet, but it's saying that this is the one who holds in his hand the staff of justice. V'yaminach, and we can see poetically the synonym, v'yaminach, his right hand, b'tzedek, right, is clenching justice. Well, actually, tzedek isn't so much justice as it is righteousness, okay? Umachon kisa'ach, and the foundation of his throne, okay, Hem mishpat v'tzedek, referring to God. Okay, we say that's part of our liturgy. We say it comes up mostly during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva. Okay, tzedek mishpat mechon kis'echa, chesed ve'emet yekademu fanecha. So here he inverts it to mechon kis'ach hem mishpat v'tzedek. Okay, now here's a curious one. Is he talking about God or is he talking about a human judge? So it says very clearly, and I highlighted the phrase, Nikreta Elohim Shofet. Now that works both ways. It means that God, Elohim, is called a Shofet, and it also means that a human Shofet is referred to as an Elohim. Okay. Now that appears frequently in this week's Torah reading. We find it, for example, V'yisho ba'al habayit el ha'elohim, in the laws of Shomrim, right? Asher yarshi'un Elohim, whoever is found guilty by the court, Yishalem shnayim l'reyehu, has to pay a fine, okay? So what we find basically is that human judges, right, are often referred to as an Elohim. And I brought you a Talmudic adage, as you can see, right? Kol dayan shedan din emet la'amito, any judge who takes care to issue I would say a virtual ruling, a virtual verdict, okay? Virtual, not in the modern sense of giving the appearance of being real, but not really being so, but virtual in the dictionary definition of veritas, of truth, right? Every judge who renders a just verdict, afilu sha'achat, right? Even on just a single occasion, ma'aleh alav hakatuv, scripture, considers him ki'ilu, as though na'asa shutaf lakadosh baruch hu, as though he were a partner with God b'maaseh v'reshit, in creation. Now, that's not faint praise, but if there's something more to it. First of all, if you stop to remember, okay, the first chapter of Genesis that reports or records the acts of creation refers to God as Elohim. Okay, so when it says that the judge who renders a just verdict is considered as though he partnered with God in creation, they're taking advantage of the fact that both God in creation and a judge in rendering a verdict are called an Elohim. Now, there's a flip side to that. And the flip side to that is the well-known conventional understanding that of the two most frequent names by which God is known, Elohim and the one that reflects adnut, that reflects lordship, okay? The former is considered to represent midat hadin, God's attribute of justice, and the latter is considered to represent midat harachamim, the attribute of compassion. So we see that both on the basis of biblical scriptural evidence and on the basis of Talmudic associations, God is referred to, God in his attribute of Elohim is a judge, and a judge who conducts himself virtuously is considered to be a partner with God. So all this is reflected here in the next two lines of the Piyut. Okay? Nikreta Elohim shofet, im kol shofet, that God is present when justice is delivered. V'memet yishpot, and if indeed the judge judges justly, nakov Elohim yishpot, right? Then he is considered to be on the level of God. Yefeinov pedei v'mishpat, okay? We want Yefeinov, which is a synonym of Jerusalem, pedei b'mishpat. We call upon God to redeem Jerusalem justly. V'tugba b'mishpat, and it will be elevated justly. Shovev shavim, he will restore those who need to be restored, bitzdaka, with righteousness, v'tukdash bitzdaka, and they will be sanctified with righteousness. Yidata, you made it known, ki ashrei shomrei mishpat, that those who observe justice are considered to be mu'usharim, to be proper, v'oseh tzedakah, and to enact righteousness. His harta, and again the Torah warns, shemor mishpat, that one should be cautious in delivering justice, vasot tzedakah, and always to deliver things with righteousness. And again, a series of psukim, ki komar Hashem shimru mishpat asu tzedakah, ki krova yeshuati lavo v'tzidkati lehigalot. Notice again the obvious linking of the salvation of the Jewish people to righteous and just conduct. Ela hadvarim asher ta'asu dabru emet, right, to speak the truth, ish et reyehu, one to another, emet u'mishpat shalom shiftu b'sha'arechem, and to conduct all dealings righteously and justly. Vayigba Hashem tzvot b'mishpat, hayla kadosh nikdash b'tzedakah, and then you see it goes into the bracha, the one following Mechayeh HaMeitim, which is the bracha of Ata Kadosh, the bracha of Kedusha. Okay. And again, another two lines. Shoftim mishpatehem, shoftehem v'nishpatehem, right? Judges and their verdicts, judges and the litigants, scharam bahem, v'onsham bahem, they will either be rewarded or punished, tzedek mehem, justly, b'resha mehem, hilachta lifnehem, again extolling virtues of justice, okay? Sadarta erkam lifnehem, you arranged. This is probably a reflection of a passage that appears at the beginning in Rashi, at the beginning of this week's Parasha. The opening verses, Ve'ela hamishpatim, these are the laws, asher tasim lifnehem, that you shall place before them. So the Midrash that Rashi quotes is attracted by the notion of what does it mean to place laws before people. Now, if we were talking about law books, right, then you understand what it means to place a law book before somebody. But since we're talking about things that people are going to be instructed verbally, what does it mean to place something audible in front of a person? So the Midrash says that what God was basically instructing Moshe to do was not just to announce the laws, but to teach them to the people. And the interesting phrase that the Midrash uses and that Rashi repeats is that so that the laws or the law books, the metaphorical law books, should be before them kishulchan aruch. Meaning, not that you tell somebody, here's the silverware drawer, here's the china cabinet, go out and set the table yourself, but you place the utensils on the table, you set the table. So the way in which Moshe was told to instruct the people in the law was compared to the way in which a table is already laid out and set, prepared for a meal. So this is probably what is reflected here, sadarta erkam lifnehem, that you arranged, you laid out, you arrayed the laws before them. Shoftem mishpat laseit pneihem, so that they could be judged properly, v'lada'at, to ascertain, midan lifnehem, who is equipped to be a judge, v'lifnemihem danim. And the judges have to know before whom they are conducting themselves. Umidani mahem. Remember again that God is a participant in the administration of justice, which is why a court can be called an Elohim. Right? Hakarui kamohem Elohim, hu shofet hu Elohei mishpat. Again, v'kol hamishpat hanishpat al yadav yushpat v'memet hushpat tukdash kadosh. And again, this is linked to the bracha of Vata Kadosh. Okay. Now, Here, there's a transition. There's a new alphabet, as you can see, right? The Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet at the beginning, a new Piyut. And this one seems to be addressed not so much to God or to judges in general, as it is speaking about Moshe Rabbeinu. And it refers to Moshe Rabbeinu as Ish Asher Honuhu, a man who was insulted by mukei mishpatim, by people who themselves had been struck by mishpatim. Now remember again that shofet and shevet, right, are identical. So who are the people who were beaten with a stick? Okay, and who are people who meet these two qualifications? One is that they themselves had been beaten by someone's stick, and in turn, they insulted Moshe Rabbeinu. Well, the answer comes in the concluding part of the line. Mi samcha aleinu kemo shofetim. These are the people who said to Moshe Rabbeinu on a celebrated occasion, who made you the boss? And it's a reference to the two people. The Midrash identifies them as Datan and Aviram, but in the Torah's narrative, they're simply referred to as Shnei Anashim Ivrim Nitzim, two Hebrews, two Jews who were fighting with one another. And Moshe Rabbeinu, if you recall, came and said to one of them, said to the one who seemed to be in the wrong, Lama takereyecha, why are you beating up on your neighbor? And they turned around and they said, Mi samcha keish sar v'shofet aleinu, right? Who put you in charge? Okay. So Moshe, the man who was insulted by Datan and Aviram, who themselves had been beaten by the Egyptian taskmasters, right? And who said to Moshe Rabbeinu, who put you in charge? Okay. Bo balashon, with that very word, nit'ala, he, Moshe, was elevated, v'mishpatim, in anything that pertains to the administration of justice. What's the word? The word is tasim. Because they said to Moshe, mi samacha, and God says to Moshe, hamishpatim asher tasim lifnehem. As though somehow by using the word tasim, God intended to undo whatever harm or damage to Moshe's reputation that had been done by Datan and Aviram when they said of him, mi samacha. V'yikshiv asher tasim lifnei shvatim, and Moses again attended to God's instructions. Gam, moreover, Yanai says, al shloshet hadvarim ha'ela, with regards to these three things, natan nafsho alehem b'chol ela, that there are three things here that Moshe Rabbeinu was prepared, if necessary, to give his life for them. What are they? We'll see in a moment the midrashic source, but we don't need to because Yanai spells it out for us. Dat, the Torah, Ha'am, Ela, this people, the people of Israel, Umishpatim Ela, and the administration of justice. Ushloshtan, all three of these things, the Torah, the Jewish people, and the administration of justice, Nikra'u Lishmo, are known by the name of Moshe Rabbeinu, Be'edut Ela, in the biblical text. And here we have the source for this in the Midrash Rabbah in Shemot, right? Ve'ela hamishpatim. Va ordinarily is a conjunction, meaning this in addition to what preceded it. Mahu ve'ela, what is it referring to? Bo ure'e kama chibeba kadosh baruch hu Moshe. Right? Come and see the love that God bestowed upon Moshe Rabbeinu. Shebisha'a shechisedu oto Datan v'Aviram b'Mitzrayim. When he was insulted, demeaned by Datan and Aviram in Egypt, Shamrulo, when they said to him, as we already recorded, Mi samcha le'isar v'shofet aleinu, Amar lam HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God as it were responded saying, Bazeh shechisadetem oto, with the very same words with which you insulted him, Ani noten go gedulah, I will elevate him, Shene'amar ve'elam mishpatim asher tasim lifnehem. And with respect to the three things that Moshe ostensibly was prepared to give his life for, and by virtue of his devotion to them, they were known by his name, we find in a somewhat longer version in the Mechilta, which is the Tanaitic Midrash on Sefer Shemot. V'chein ata motzei, shekol davar she'adam noten nafsho alav, anything for which a person is so devoted that he's willing, if necessary, to give his life for it, nikra al shemo, it becomes associated with him. Bishlosha dvarim natan nafsho Moshe aleihem, there were three things in particular that Moshe Rabbeinu was devoted to, v'nikru al shemo, and therefore they were associated with his name. Very quickly, the first one, as you see highlighted, was the Torah. Okay. And v'nikreit al shemo, where do we find the Torah associated with his name? Shene'emar, at the end of the book of Malachi, zichru Torat Moshe Avdi. It's not the only place in Nevi'im in which the Torah is referred to as the Torah of Moshe, but he must have had an affinity for this particular verse. Second paragraph, Natan nafsho Yisrael, he was devoted to the Jewish people. Therefore, Nikra'u al Shemo. Now here's a very funny, this is a backhanded compliment, because after the Egel, God says to Moshe, Lech Reid, descend from the mountain. Why? Ki shichet amacha, because your people, right, has deteriorated. Okay, but again, it's referred to as Moses' people. And the third the third object for which he was devoted, Natam Nafsho al Hadayanim, other judges or the administration of justice in general. And where do we get that from? Because in Sefer Devarim, we get a further expansion of the roles and rules of judges. God says to Moshe, Shofetim v'shoterim titein lecha b'chol she'arecha. And that is a curious thing, because basically, if you remember, Sefer Devarim is written by Moshe Rabbeinu, right, in the first person. So when the verse says, Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha, right, appoint judges, it's really Moshe speaking to the Jewish people. So the lecha in that pasuk, according to the pshat, right, is the Jewish nation, okay? But since we know that there's nothing in the Torah that Moses wrote that wasn't dictated to him by God, it's as though when God said the word Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha, he was referring not to the lecha, the corporate Jewish people, but he's referring to the individual Moshe Rabbeinu. And this again is taken as a sign of the fact that he was devoted to justice. Okay. And again, the continuation, right? As you see the letters Hey, Vav, Zayin, etc. So it's a continuation of the previous selection. Hein gam shlosha dvarim ba'olam. Just as there are three things to which Moshe was devoted and which bore his name, there are another three things, ushlashtam ma'amidin olam, that are at the foundation of the world. And this, of course, is an allusion to the Mishnah, which you can see right below in Masechet Avot. Slightly different version of it in the Talmud Yerushalmi, both citing Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel as saying al shlosha dvarim ha'olam omed. That is, there were three things on which the foundation of the world rests, and they are din. So you can see its relationship to this. Emet, that too has a relationship to this, and shalom. Okay. Now Yanai, playing on this, says vadai emet asher hu chotem yado. Right, the value of emet is that, according to rabbinic tradition, chotamo shel hakadosh baruch hu emet, meaning if God, as it were, had a signet ring, okay, and let's say he punched his signet ring into the wax seal, right, and removed it. What impression would it make in the seal? It would make an impression of the letters Aleph, Mem, Tav. Okay? Emet. So, the Emet is considered to be the Chotem Yado, the signet ring, the seal of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mishpat asher hu v'yado. Remember again the play on Mishpat and Shevet, which is held in a hand. Okay? V'shalom asher miyado, right? Hashem yavarech et amo b'shalom. Zechut u'mishpat im na'aseh, that if we administer justice properly, hinei ha'emet, then that's verity, that's truth. Ve'emet im no'as, and if truth is maintained, hein shalom u'schar emet, then the benefit of conducting justice truthfully is the perpetuation of shalom, of peace. Chosen mishpat le'Elohim hu, again a biblical phrase, v'mishpatei tzidko le'olam brito baruch hu, ta'anot mishpat nishpat yishne, pen shofet mishpat davar yishaneh, yasbir panim v'lo yakir panim, v'yashne shtei hapanim kamo hapanim lapanim, and again, praise for the administration, the proper administration of justice. And again, as you can see, this is a theme on a variation on the theme that's struck by the Mishnah and Avot and by the Talmud Yerushalmi. And that brings us to our second Piyut. This Piyut is more in the style of the Piyutim we looked at last week, that apropos specifically of the Aseret HaDibrot, one by Saadia Gaon and one by Shlomo ibn Gabirol, which, because of their attachment to the Aseret HaDibrot and to the notion that somehow or another all of the 613 Torah requirements come under the umbrellas of one or another of the Aseret HaDibrot, that genre of Piyut is called Azharot. Okay? Not so much warnings, as we said, maybe just awareness, because you have to be aware of mitzvot aseh rather than literally being warned about them. Okay? So here we have something that is also in the genre of Azharot, but on the other hand, it's different because it comes from Ashkenaz rather than from Sepharad or the Middle East. And this is a new Paitan to our gallery of Paitanim. He is known basically as Rabbi Eliyahu HaZaken, right? Rabbi Eliyahu the Elder. And as you see, he lived at the end of the 10th and the early part of the 11th centuries. And he came originally from the French city of Le Mans, in which I don't think they were already conducting world famous auto races, at least not a millennium ago. Okay, and was a contemporary of a Paitan we have encountered before, another Ashkenazic Paitan, Rabbi Yosef Tuv Elam. You remember Tuv Elam was the Hebrew equivalent of the French bon fils. Okay, Rabbi Eliyahu, as were many Jews in Ashkenaz in this very early period, had contacts with the academies of the Gaonim in Baghdad. And this Rabbi Eliyahu is known to have been particularly close with the last of the Gaonim, Rab Haya Gaon, who died in 1040. And indeed, the note in the second line says that there are some traditions, Masorot, that he actually was related to him. If I'm not mistaken, there's something about his being his son-in-law or brother-in-law of Rav Haya Gaon, which of course, since the Gaonim would arguably only have permitted their children to marry people of with established lineage or with rabbinic credentials. Of course, if this is true, or even in order to be the subject of a rumor, it has to reflect well on this Rabbi Eliyahu HaZaken. Now, the important thing is at the end of the second line, which is Hamasarat HaBavlit, the liturgical traditions of the yeshivot in Baghdad, Hitnagda, opposed Shiluv Piyutim B'Tfilah. Okay? That was not the practice in the yeshivot in Baghdad to incorporate Piyutim into the liturgy. Therefore, Rabbi Eliyahu, who accepted this tradition, made a point of composing Azharot, because Azharot are not incorporated into the liturgy, but they are recited independently. Okay? So what we have here is the introduction to Rabbi Eliyahu HaZaken, an early 11th century Ashkenazic scholar, to introduction to the Azharot that he composed. Now here, I'm not going to have you read it, but you might be able to make out, as you see, this is a 13th century manuscript. So indeed, it represents one of the oldest liturgical texts that we have from Ashkenaz. If you look in the middle column, the right-hand column is very, very little. It's not complete and it's faded on the bottom, right? That's the one that the tree is growing out of, okay? If you look in the middle column, pretty much in the middle of the middle column, there is, it looks like the letter bet, right? Dark, right? It looks like, a 3/4 of a square, okay? And inside it, you can see a couple of letters that are larger than the other letters on the page. Okay? If you can make out those letters, then you've made out the first word in the introduction to the Piyut, which is emet. Okay? You can see the aleph clearly, you can see the mem clearly, the tav. If you know that it spells emet, you can see the tav. Okay, but we're not going to try to decipher the 13th century manuscript. By the way, I will make a point about this 13th century Ashkenazic manuscript. Wouldn't you think that a 13th century Ashkenazic manuscript would use Rashi script? And yet, this is not Rashi script, is it? So, of course, the answer is because Rashi script has nothing to do with Rashi. Right? Rashi did not write in Rashi script. Okay? The script that Rashi used was pretty much like the script that you see here. What the world has come to call Rashi script, or Ktav Rashi, refers to the font in which the commentary of Rashi on the Torah was set when it was published for the first time as one of the earliest printed Hebrew books at the end of the 15th century. The first edition of Rashi's commentary on the Torah was published in a Sephardic Jewish community in Italy. And what they did basically is that they wanted to recognize Rashi, to give recognition to the importance of this commentary, and they did so by printing it in their most fancy font. Therefore, the font which they chose, which is not Ashkenazic font, but is a Sephardic font, came to be known inadvertently as the Rashi font. And erroneously, instead of understanding it correctly as the font in which the text of Rashi was printed, the erroneous impression was created that somehow this is the font in which Rashi wrote.
In which Italian city was this?
Much better example of what an early Ashkenazic font might have looked like than the one that we recognize from the text of Rashi.
In which Italian city was this print published?
Not mistaken, Reggio de Calabria.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So here, actually, there have been a couple of books that have been published on the subject just of these azharot, and they are replete with explanatory notes, so it really won't pose a great challenge to us. But first of all, let's just take a look and see the acrostic. Okay, so I've highlighted the letters Aleph and Lamed, and then in the continuation, Yud, He, Vav, spelling Eliyahu, and then Chet, and you should know what's coming next, right? You should already know. If you have the poet's name, and following the poet's name, you don't find a base. If there were a bet, then you'd expect the bet to be the first letter of the word Ben or Bar, and what you expect to follow would be the name of his father. But if his first name, his only name, right, is followed by the letter Chet, then you know that the next letters are going to be Zayin and Kof to spell out Chazak. Okay. Back again to the beginning. Emet yehege chiki. My mouth, chek is the palate, right, will articulate. Yehege, emet, truth. Mishpatei Hashem Adoni. Right? The laws. Right? The laws are the truth. Kol pikudei chol, all of the laws that pertain to everything. Basis teva adani. They are the foundation on which my, he's playing on words here. An Eden is you notice that the publisher of this text, the author of the commentary, says that a lot of this here is Laman Hecharuz, right? That a lot of the words here are there simply to create the rhyme, right? Because you'd expect in the first line it should be with a patach under the nun, right? Referring to Hashem, it should be Adonai, right? But it's changed from a patach to a chirik, Adoni, because the balance of the rhyme scheme is a chirik male e, right? Not just that, but it's nun. Simple rhyme schemes rhyme only a vowel and a consonant, right? A fuller rhyme scheme, a more sophisticated rhyme scheme, rhymes a consonant with a vowel. There's a famous line in Ibn Ezra who says, there's a biblical prohibition against hitching an ox and a donkey to the same plow. Okay, the Torah says, "Lo tacharosh bishor uvachamor yachdav." Okay, don't plow, right, with an ox and a donkey. Okay, Ibn Ezra, in a critique of medieval Hebrew poetry, substituted for tacharosh the word tacharoz. Charuz is a rhyme. Lo tacharoz, you can't make a rhyme out of shor v'chamor, because even though they both end with a vowel and a consonant, or, right, they do not share the final, the next to the last consonant. One is shin with or, the other is mem with or. So Ibn Ezra cautions lo tacharoz bishor uvachamor yachdav, that you can't make a rhyme out of the words shor and chamor. So here we have the full rhyme scheme. Okay. Now in the second line, the word adani is an eden, which means a foundation, a basis. As he says, basis teva adani. If you look at the explanatory, right, it says teva adani. It says adaneha hotba'u. They were in the Mishkan. There were adanim. The walls of the Mishkan, the planks that formed the vertical planks that formed the walls of the Mishkan, were inserted into adanim. They were inserted into slots, right, which then formed the foundation for the Mishkan. Okay, so again, it's an acknowledgement of justice as being the foundation of everything. Levale kashel, lest I slip up. Nidvot pila hamideni, right? Then my speech, my words will prevent me from falling, or if I slip, they will enable me to stand upright. Ritzena Hashem umishpatecha lamdeni. Now this again is a poetic style where the fourth line of every stanza is actually a biblical verse. So if you want to think about it, the poet is really actually working backwards, meaning he's either got to create a rhyme scheme, and then he has to find an appropriate biblical verse that ends with the same rhyme, or he's going to start with the biblical verse, and then he's going to manufacture earlier lines of poetry that will then naturally or unnaturally end with the same rhyme. Okay. Yitron hachsher chochma sod machshevotecha. To play on a verse in Kohelet, that hachsher, preparation, Yitron hachsher, the advantage of preparation, chochma, of preparing wisdom, that is to say, of, let's say, establishing laws, okay, formulating laws. Sod machshevotecha, again, is the basis of the divine will. Galeinai vabita nitzore dotecha, Again, is a play on another biblical verse. In Psalms, the verse is Galenai vabita niflaot mitorotecha. Right? We ask God to somehow remove the veil or that is blocking our vision so that we can see, according to the verse in Tehillim, the wonders of the Torah. Here he says, vabita nitzore dotecha, that I will see what it takes in order to observe your laws. Again, he's calling upon God to enable him to understand the mitzvot, because remember again, this is an introduction to Azharot, which is an attempt to enumerate all 613 mitzvot of the Torah. I should add parenthetically, although I think it's pretty obvious, that so many people in the Middle Ages attempted to count the 613 mitzvot of the Torah, and not that no two counts are identical, but not all the different counts are identical. So what you end up with, of course, is that if you would make a list of anything that was ever considered to be one of the 613 mitzvot of the Torah by anybody who ever attempted to enumerate them, you would quickly discover that in toto, there are considerably more than 613 mitzvot. Okay. And yet, we just simply perpetuate the idea, which starts in the Gemara, that there are in fact 613 mitzvot. And again, the idea initiated in the Gemara, that somehow the 613 can be divided into 248 of one category and 365 of another category, which may just be an artificial division, or it could be a symbolic division. Uve'erech milai mimcha, when I speak to you, God, miskav havaksha, I will ask of you something noble. Chukei chayim bamlo inaksha, I'm asking God to direct me towards chukei chayim, the laws by which one can live, the laws of life. Bamlo inaksha, so that I will not falter in observing them. These are the laws that were desired by your beloved. The beloved of God, of course, is the Jewish people. And when did they desire to accept these laws? Bashlishi lachufsha, in the third month to their freedom from Egypt. That, of course, is a reference to the 6th of Sivan, to Shavuot. Limud midbar ba'avat nafshat. And these people who spent so much time in the wilderness accepted the Torah willingly. Okay. And there's a continuation, as I said, just the conclusion of it. Zekuka shevatayim, the laws of the Torah and the laws of the Torah are as pure, as refined, as something which has gone through a refining process, not just once or twice, but 7 times, right? And therefore it is like a gargeret revivim. It's like rividim. It's like a gems in a necklace. Ya'alatchen lokcha zivudim. Ya'alatchen again is a reference to the Jewish people. Kadosh tzuri dvareha chamudim. And again, the words of the Torah, particularly the legal portions, are again, as he made in the previous paragraph, chamudim, what the Jewish people desired to accept. Ya'ir li ozen l'shmoa kalimudim, and he asks of God to give him the attention, to enable him to attend to the laws of the Torah as much as necessary in order to absorb them, in order to learn them, and in order then to be able to practice them. And with that, indeed, we reach the conclusion. Let me quick look and see in the chat. God says Abraham is chosen because he will lead his family with tzedek and mishpat. Yeah, actually, technically it's tzedakah u'mishpat, but yes, indeed, yes. So tzedek and mishpat, again, remember, to the extent that we say tzedek u'mishpat machon kis'echa, that tzedek, righteousness, and emet, truth, are the foundation on which the throne of God rests, then it means, of course, that they are the purpose for which the world was created. They are necessary prerequisites for the maintenance of the world. And therefore, if you recall, it's din, emet, and shalom right? Because if the din isn't practiced with emet, then there'll be no peace. The fact that sim shalom, so we look at back here, precedes the final bracha in the Amidah, it is the final bracha, implies that his blessings are arranged like Shulchan Aruch. Oh, yeah, yes. The bracha of Shalom is the concluding bracha in the Amidah. The paragraph of Sim Shalom is just merely the prelude to the bracha itself. And indeed, that's why we say, generally we say, Hamvarechet Amo Yisrael Ba Shalom, as though somehow we were concerned only with our little corner of the world and peace, but it's customary during the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah in some liturgies, to change that to Oseh HaShalom. And Oseh HaShalom would, of course, have greater universal implications than just Hamavarechet Amo Yisrael B'Shalom. And with that, indeed, I wish you once again a good week, and we'll see you again next Tuesday.
Thank you.
You're welcome again. Take care.